Okay, you're good to start.
Cool. Hello all, thank you for coming to our last user group for the year. I think I might have a chat with the committee to see if we want to run an early December one, but I think this might be our last one. And I have towards the end of the presentation as well, I'll have a quick chat about what's going on with the user group for the following year, for next year in 2021. There's been some changes, I think, that will come, so I'll talk through those. So before we kick off, I'll just go through our acknowledgement of country. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Waduk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, as well as acknowledge the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. So being online, I'll just monitor the timing, but I think being virtual at lunchtime, if we need to run a little bit over, I think it should be fine. Don't stress too much there. And just a reminder, we're recording this session, so Peter Schmidt will send us a link and we'll share that out on LinkedIn and the Dynamics platform. So today, we're going to have a quick one tip from Ian from DXC. He's just going to run us through the new Dataverse SQL connection that's been out for a little bit in preview. He'll give us a bit of detail on that. Give us a quick demo, and then straight over to Lindsay Wynn from DXC, just going into a deep dive into the building efficient flows with the new Dataverse connector. And then we'll just wrap up with a bit of a Q&A, and I'll have a bit of a speech about just the local user group for next year and also what's happening at a national level as well. And then we'll close it up by 1 p.m. So it's a fairly simple agenda today. Cool. So without further ado, Ian, would you like to take control and give us a bit of a demo?
Certainly will. Okay. Waiting for approval. Is anybody approving?
See anything at the moment?
Can I just share my screen?
Yeah, just share. Should take control. Yeah. There we go.
Okay, all good. Just get rid of all these screens. Hold on, I've got a million screens open. Okay. So a long-awaited requirement for anybody that remembers the good old on-premise days when you used to be able to just go to the SQL database, run queries, do updates. Well, we can't still do updates, creates, or anything like that, but we can now. Microsoft are basically giving us access, and it is still in preview, as Ben pointed out, to be able to query, basically create a connection via SQL Management Studio or other processes to basically connect directly to the SQL database backs the Dataverse. Sorry, I almost said CDS. Backs the Dataverse and actually run queries, read-only queries directly on that, which is something which a lot of people have been asking for a very long time. So I'm basically just going to run through how you do that, and it's going to be a very quick one tip. So providing you've got an appropriate you're at the appropriate version in Power Apps, essentially, you should be able to go into your admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com via your environments, and then when you open up your environment, if you have the right, if you're in the right region, etc., if you go to settings, and we'll just wait for this about 5 seconds. Okay, if you go to settings, if you go to the product features, so we'll open that up, we'll go to features. There's this new little option down here, which is called TDS endpoint. And as you can see, it does say not recommended for production environments. I'm guessing that's because it's in preview at the moment. But essentially, you can enable it. And once you've enabled it, give it, well, in my experience, about 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. And then essentially what you can do, you can open Management Studio, which I have over here. I'm just going to close this down. Well, actually, I'll do a new connect. And you can basically just create the database engine. And I don't know whether you guys can see this, but essentially what you end up doing is in your SQL Server Management Studio, you put in your domain name, and the port 5558 separated by a comma. And then you basically log on using your standard Power Apps D365 user ID and password. And then you just press connect. And then by the wonder of SQL, as we open this up, you can see here that I've got my underlying database, and I have my tables. And I can go into any table I want. Let's just find something that's vaguely sensible. And I can now start running queries on it, which obviously it makes life a lot easier if you're just trying to verify data. Now I've been using LinkPad for many years, and I generally use that when I haven't been able to access SQL databases. But now we've got this, we can run really complex queries. If you're a lot happier in SQL running queries, you can obviously access this and do some really complex queries to basically check your data, make sure everything's looking okay. Essentially fill stuff for porting purposes if you really want to. It gives us lots and lots more options. And obviously it stops you also having to require the data export service to basically dump out every, if you want to basically do some data mining or whatever, dumping out the database into an Azure SQL database, you can just go directly to this one instead. So that, in short, is my one tip.
Cool, thanks, Ian. Quick question. Sorry, just a quick question. Does this count towards the API throughput by any chance? So if we're hitting...
well, we're not hitting the API, so and that's a question for Peter, I guess, but I'm imagining as we're not hitting the API, I'm hoping that it wouldn't, but...
Short answer is I don't know, but I don't think it does, because like you say, you're not hitting the API. The other thing I was just going to say is it shouldn't impact operational performance either, because one of the things that the Dataverse does is there's actually like a shadow copy of your live data. And so when you hit a query, when you do direct query or when you do a SQL query, it's actually querying that replica rather than the live copy. So that's another thing to be aware of when people go, what's the difference between using SQL and using Dataverse tables? The Dataverse does clever stuff like that behind the scenes as well.
Cool, that's good to know. Cool. I didn't know that. Cool. So there you go. That's short and sweet. But for anybody, like I said, anybody coming from on-premise days, it's something that we've been longing for quite a time.
Yeah, cool. So just one thing you mentioned there, Ian, that it's still in preview. Is that right?
It is still in preview. Yes, obviously I don't know when it's going to go into GA, but obviously that's why they have stated on that. It's almost like a disclaimer saying don't use in production environments, or I guess it's don't use in production environments at your own risk. So I don't know whether Peter's got any more clarity on when it's likely to go GA. It's been out, that toggle has been around for a few months now. So I'm not sure about when it might go GA though.
Yeah, I don't know. It's unusual because normally stuff is in preview for a relatively short time these days, and then it goes live pretty quick. So I would think maybe by the end of this year, but I don't honestly know. They don't tend to give you timescales on stuff these days.
And the key is always to remember to put that port at the end, because I originally forgot to put the port at the end and via the comma, and I couldn't understand why it wasn't connecting. And then it's, oh yeah, I need that 5558 at the end. There is also, if you Google CDS, probably not Dataverse, but if you Google CDS with SQL query, it does come up early in the search. So it's well documented on the Microsoft website too.
Yeah, cool. I just see you got a bit of chatter there going in the chat there from Jason Russell saying that it says read only in the connection, so it's only for data verifications purposes only, no insert updates.
No insert updates or anything like that.
Yeah, so if that's the Jason Russell on, I'm pretty sure he knows that with on-premise databases, you're never meant to insert or update either, even though, you know, quietly probably some of us got away with it in the early years. But yeah, so the same principle still applies. And definitely now, being read-only, wouldn't be able to do it anyway. Yeah, cool. Oh, thanks for that, Ian. Appreciate it. Does anyone else have any other questions for Ian? If not, we'll keep moving. No questions? Cool. Instead of me just sharing my screen again, I think, Lynn, if you just want to take control and start your presentation, we'll leave it all to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everyone, have a good afternoon. It's really great pleasure to have a privilege to present at this BOTS user group. And for those who don't know me, my name is Lin, and I'm Microsoft Business Application MVP. I started working as a CRM 4.0 developer and currently working as a senior technical consultant in DXC Technology, and which is based in Wellington, New Zealand, for my office. For those who want to take the screenshot of the slide or want to know something about some of the slides, so there are in each slide, in almost each slide, there is some description about the feature functionality that I'm going to present. So you can take the screenshot on this QR code, or I also pasted the link to download this slide in the chat window. So the topic that I'm going to present is how to build the flows efficiently using the database connector, even though the connector is still named as the CDS or CDS current environment connector in the flow environment, but Microsoft will eventually rename it to database connector. And this is for when I started building flows. I started working because when I built classic workflows, and Microsoft recommend to use the CDS flows instead of the async workflows, and that's where quite a confusion for including me and also my colleagues or also people in the community, because we all came from the Dynamics and we just started to get into the Dynamics 365 connector straight away. And there are a lot of things which are the flows. Building flows is a bit the classic workflows, but quite really different from how it is in the it's more similar to the Azure Logic apps, and it's quite different. So we need to, in this session, you will learn what are the do's and don'ts, and a little bit of tips and tricks about getting the data and setting the lookup fee and all this stuff. So we have 5 main sessions. The first session, first topic is about the different connectors, and we have the second topic is about the triggering parameters, especially how to filter and the filter query and expression. And the third topic is about the list actions parameter, about the select query, filter query, expand and fetch XML. And the fourth one is about how to set and get the field values, especially those tricky ones that we need to learn about. And then we'll conclude with the other topics, which doesn't cover in any of the other topics that I presented. So for those who doesn't know what are the connectors in Power Automate, they are more of like giving you access to the application provided by Microsoft or third-party applications like Twitter or Slack. And you can also build custom connectors, but we're not going into these detail in this session. The first connector, which is available for Power Automate related to the Dynamics 365 or Dataverse, is Dynamics 365 connector. That is the very first available connector available, and then there's the Command Data Service connector. So throughout the whole session, I will just refer this as the Command Data Service connector, because this one is not relabeled in the Flow Studio yet, so I will just keep it this way. And the last connector available is the latest and greatest features added by Microsoft, and which is being keeping up to date for CDS current environment connector. Nowadays, getting the right one, that the connector is easier, because when you create the new trigger or the new action, the first one you can see in the CDS, the Command Data Service connector, is the one that you are supposed to choose, which is the CDS current environment connector. But for some reason, if you want to use for the other CDS connector, the old one, what you can do is you can enter the commandeer service. And what you can see is if you see the ... that means this one is the CDS current environment connector, and the other one is the old CDS old connector. And in the action, you can see more details, description of the connector without truncated, so you can easily identify the action. So let's talk about the CDS current environment connector. So this is the recommended connector. Microsoft has recommended to use this as it should be the first choice of when you build the flows related to the Dataverse, or when you build the flows related to the Dynamics 365. Only if you are not something you cannot achieve with this connector, you should try to consider the old CDS connector. One of the good thing about this CDS current environment connector is this auto-activated upon solution import, so that you don't have the flows imported without status off. This is not going to be much of an issue in the future because we now have this connection reference, which I will explain more detail later in this session. And after that, CDS current and connector environment connector is this all-in-one trigger. You can trigger like create, update, and delete all three actions in one trigger, and it has also more advanced options like filtering attributes and filter expression, and you want to run as different users in this connector. And Microsoft has also updated all these new updates that they have ever done. They will just do it in this connectors, like they added the execute change set request, get and file, upload the file image content, or we can use the predict with the AI builder model, relate and relate. And one of my favorite is performing a bound or unbound action within the Dataverse. And it also has a better query capability in terms of fetch. We can do the fetch XML query, and we can also limit the number of select queries returned from this list records. And if we are not, as I mentioned, if we are not able to perform certain scenarios like selecting the record and stuff, triggering on demand flow, we can use the CDS connector. We usually refer to this as the CDS classic connector or standard connector or old CDS connector. We can use this to use in the integration with other Dataverse environments, because you can select the different environments within the same tenant. And there are also certain scenarios which are not possible with the current environment connector, like the on-demand trigger or updating the null value to the lookup field. Also, it's not available in the logic apps as well. Microsoft has deprecation plans. They have intent to remove both Dynamics 365 and this old CDS connector in the future, and keep the CDS current environment connector. But they haven't set the date for removal of this CDS connector yet, until they address all these feature priorities. The next one is Dynamics 365 connectors, and when do we have to use is Dynamics 365 connector is we should never use this connector for new flows. Then don't let friends use this Dynamics 365 connectors. It has been deprecated since 5th of May 2020, which is like 6 months ago. And we should stop creating new connections with this Dynamics 365 connector and try to convert if you ever have any existing flow with this Dynamics 365 connector. So in summary, we have this CDS current environment connector, which is the recommended connector by Microsoft. And we have the old CDS connector when we should use whatever scenario is not possible with the current environment connector. And we should never use the Dynamics 365 connector anymore. Okay, so before I start to the next topic about the trigger parameters, this will be in demo. And do you have any question? You can unmute yourself and ask me.
No, I think we're all good at the moment.
Okay, good to know. So let's start about the trigger parameters. So this is more about the CDS current environment connector trigger. So the first thing, Okay, so the first thing is in the CDS trigger, if for the update trigger, you always set those filtering attributes. If you come from the workflow or the background of building workflows or the plugins, you know you should limit the trigger to certain update of the certain attributes so that it wouldn't trigger the flow unnecessarily, and it also avoids the looping of the infinite loop in case if you update another field within of the same records within the flow. And with the flow, unlike CDS classic workflows, we have this filter expression. So what filter expression does is it only triggers if your flows match with the certain filter expression web auditor web API filter expression. Let's say, for example, this one is when only the account, this flow will trigger only when the account is deactivated and when the state code equal to 1. So if you only trigger this one, what is equivalent to this is normally if you only trigger this in the classic workflow, and in the first step we check, okay, status is equal to 1, and we do something, and otherwise it cancel this flow and we're not doing anything. So instead of that, if we have this filter expression, it will only trigger when this filter match with a certain criteria. It not only helps you improve the performance of the flow by not triggering the unnecessary flows, it also helps you to have a cleaner flow run history where you can see the flows which actually run in this flow. So this is one of tips in using the filter expression. And if you're using the SharePoint connector, or if you're using the old CDS connector, there's no filter expression, then how do you do the filtering part? And in that case, this is the formula, flow expression. You can use this settings, and here in the trigger conditions, you can filter it. What it does is we have this trigger output, and the state code of the trigger outputs equals to 1. It is the same condition as this one, but it is in the flow expression. So this is not only limited to the old CDS connector. You can also use that for other connectors like the SharePoint and OneDrive, Excel, other connectors as well. That is really handy if you don't have this filter expression. So yeah, in this session, this topic is mainly about this filtering attributes and filter expression and the trigger parameters within the flow itself. Let's go to the next topic. The next topic is about this action parameters. So here we're going to talk about the select query, filter query, and how can we use the expand query in this fetch XML query. So the select query is, first of all, why do we need to use the select query? So in one of my fellow MVP, Sarah Lagakis, mentioned in her blog post that in the list action, record is not a buffet and is a la carte menu. So you do not order the whole menu of food and then pick and order what to eat, and that would be too expensive. So you decide beforehand what to order, and then you make sure you consume it all. So if we query the list records, we know that what we are going to retrieve. So let's say I'm going to use the full name column only. So then I just query the full name. So in that way, what happens is it's not only help with the system performance to query only the data, but also even in the dynamic list, you can also only see that there is the full name. You don't see the created by, created on, first name, last name, a lot of dozens of columns from this contact table. So that will help you to easily filter down the list of columns as well. And Microsoft has recently introduced in the flow checker, if you don't provide anything with the select, filter, or top count, it will show you a warning sign, and you need to update the action, populate one of the select, top count, or the filter query. So different parts with, so this is the records list record without parameter, and that is where you see the different warnings in the flow checker. And let's say for the, if you are filtering the column for the select query, the lookup query, the lookup column behaves differently, because not only you have to put the column, but also have to put the web API style for the lookup is the underscore, the column name, underscore value. So this is where you trigger the action to query the actual value. And this is just for this flow designer to query the populate in the dynamic bots. So let's say here I can just select the both the created by, but it will come as the value as well as it will come in this dynamic value list. Let's say if I only provide this created by underscore value, and if you do so, it will not come into the in the list of the records, even though it does return the value. So if you're happy with just writing the expression to pick up the value, you don't need it, the field name. Otherwise, you also have to put the column name as well as the underscore column name underscore value. So that is one of the tips about for the lookup. The filter query can be a bit tricky. So here, this filter query that I wrote in here is, I just converted in the text. I describe, get the inactive contact related to the current account, which is created 7 days ago, and the name begins with test. So it's not really impossible, like for someone, not even the functional consultant, even for a technical consultant to write such kind of query on top of my head, especially when it comes with the dynamics specific query. So in that way, what you can do is you can use the fetch XML builder. This in the exam toolbox, you enter whatever the filter that you want to use, and then you can click on the for automate parameters, and then here you will get the filter query, and then just copy and paste it into your flow expression. That's easy. And it not only give you this filter query, it also gives you the expand query, so that you don't have to really learn to know about how to do this kind of expand query. So the expand query is useful when you are getting the field from the related entities. Let's say I want to get the list of contacts, and I want to get the last name and email of the created by user, and modify by user of the first name. In that way, and I have to use, normally I would use apply to each, and just get the one of the records by get the system user for the created by GUID. But if you do the expand query, you can get all these attributes in this one single query, and it will show you in this dynamic list. So here I have the last name, the email address and first name. So it shows as created by primary email, created by last name, and created by first name, and so on and so forth. So this is the lookup name on the current entity, and this is the column name on the related table. So that is how you get the expand query to get the next step related table fields. And it is really helpful, like when we want to specify the one of the most scenario that I encounter is naming the record set which are automatically created, and once the record is created, trigger the flow to get pick the data from the related entities or the current entities and concatenate and get this kind of format. So which was previously relatively easier in the classic workflow, but now we have to do one step of expand query to get all these fields. And just now I show you we can get this related entity in the dynamic value, but it's not always the case. Let's say we're using the company name of the contact, which is actually the customer polymorphic field. In that case, we are not able to retrieve this kind of values from the list. So if we check in the list, we don't see the company name field in this list because this is polymorphic and the flow designer cannot render it properly. So in that case, what you can do is you just run the flow once. Once you finish the flow, I will show you in here in the slides. It might be easier. So if we have this kind of scenario, we just run the flow once, and you copy the JSON output of that flow, and we create the new burst JSON and generate from the sample and paste that JSON into that. That will automatically generate the JSON schema. And once you have done, you can use that field into the next step of your flow. So after that, we can retrieve the industry code or account number, website URL from the related parent company, parent customer ID. But the caveat is that we cannot get the display name, not the citizen developer friendly display name. It will return as the schema, the logical name, because that is how the bus JSON works. And let's say if we want to retrieve more than one level up, okay, I want to retrieve the contact and the created by and the business unit of the created by user. In that way, we can retrieve the 2-level expansion. You can use the fetch XML tool to build up the up to 8 level of the nested expansion, and it will be the same way because the flow designer will only able to show you the first level of the attributes. Let's say here it can show you the created by last name, but it will not be able to show you the division of this business unit because it's 2 level up. So that's where you have to remember, it cannot show the polymorphic lookup. It cannot show you the dynamic value field list from the more than 1 level up. So one of the solution is you can use the just now we tried we used the JSON, parse JSON to retrieve one. Another one is we can use the expression to get the one. Okay, so here is how, this is how you would normally get the created by. Okay, so what you have to do, put the created by and the business, actually here it's a bit wrong. It must be the created by, the business unit ID and the division name. So, and there, how, let's say, so you go into the expression and write this created by business unit ID and the division name. And then once you save it and refresh it, it will render like this. For the first time, it will show like this. And as you can see, it will just retrieve the same attribute just as how you do the burst JSON. So if you're not more familiar with this burst JSON, more familiar with the expression, you can use this instead of burst JSON. And the next one is the fetch XML query. And if you can use the fetch XML query if you want something which is not achievable with the web API because there are some limitations on it. And some of the time it's easier to generate the fetch XML using the advanced find, or you can use the fetch XML builder tool to generate it. And there are some things that interesting thing. What if you use the both fetch XML and the web API query all together? So if you use these two all together, the select query will combine. So in this one, it will return both first name and the last name of this contact records. And the filter query will filter further. So it will do the filter with this first, and then it will filter the result of the fetch XML and add additional filter on top of it and return the records which are matching with both filters. And order will be override. So this order here, last name will be ignored, and it will be ordered by the first name in the descending order. And expand will also add it into the web result, but it will return in the alias, just like how the fetch XML query returns. So instead of in the web API, if we do the expand, what it will do is for the child records, it will return in the array objects, but here it will just return in the fetch XML prefix style alias. And the top count will also override. So let's say even though if you specify 5 here, it will return 10 records. So that's all with this list actions that we need to look out for, and these are all the tips. So any questions with this list actions before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, Lynn, there was a couple of questions just asked in the chat. Jason Russell was just asking, can we specify both? Going back to the created by, I think we might have covered that off, I think. Can we specify both the created by and the created by value earlier on? I think you did show that.
Yes, created by and created by value in the list records here. Yeah, What was the question?
Can you specify both, I guess, at the same time?
Oh, yes. We can specify both at the same time,
Okay.
but the value will only return for this one. This one we just added for the sake of showing it in the dynamic value list, so that the designer would render and show that field in this list. Let's say if we don't add the created by, and it will not show in the list, even though on the actual run it would just return the value.
Right. Okay. Cool. And then there was another question there around, can it handle many-to-manys as well? I guess from the
expand
list.
query.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can handle many-to-many for or one-to-many, many-to-many. We just need to generate it from the fetch example 2, and we can do it. Yeah, it is quite similar nature as the one-to-many.
Yeah, cool. And would you use that Axiom Toolbox tool to construct the expand query as well, or would you? Does it have to be done by fetch XML only?
No, you can also use the exam tool to generate the expand query.
Yeah, cool. All right. No worries. And that's all the questions there was, I think, at this stage.
Okay, cool. So the next one, I will go to the most use case that I have encountered when I first started Flow is getting the number of records. So from the list record, how to get the number of records greater than 0, and I want to do something, and I just have to put the length function around the output value of this from the list records. So that is the common requirement. And another common requirement is getting the first records. So let's say I want to send an email. I know the email address of the queue. I know the name of the queue. And when I retrieve, if I just retrieve and get the queue ID in the next one, let's say if I use something from the list record action, it will automatically put into the apply to each block, because the designer knows that it will return the array, and I'm using just array as the one of the fields from the array. And if we are pretty sure that we know only one record will return, just like environment variable, just like the queue, so we can use the first and the output of the body of the body of, okay, so for output of the first list record steps and put into the first function, and followed by the question mark and the attributes name. So that's how we write this kind of expression. So this question mark is added just to handle the null. So if we don't add this question mark, and if we query let's say one of the fields which can be null, and the flow will fill with the null expression, null reference error. So the next one is the getting the dynamic content in the oh yeah, so this one is, I'm not sure you're familiar with this kind of expression builder. This is the new expression builder that's Microsoft has enabled. So it is you have to go and enable it in the, so if you go to this flow settings and Power Automate settings, And then if you enable this experimental feature and save it, and you will get this one. So there are sort of bugs here and there, but for me, I prefer to use the new expression builder. And when I'm really totally stuck with this, and I just turn off it and just save and refresh the page to and use it in the old expression builder. And the next one is getting the formatted value. What is formatted value is we have this twice, which used to be option set, and the lookup. We want to get the label display name of those column values. In that case, what we can do is we can use put the field name, and we use this one at OData community display v1 formatted value, and we have instead of the status reason, this one is the status reason formatted. If you see, this one is just applied to each and the status code, and this one is the same, but at the end of the column name, it appends with this special formatted value. So far, we are not able to retrieve it, select it from the list of the dynamic values, but hopefully Microsoft will add that in the future so that we can just retrieve the list. So this is how this list goes, and this is where the actual formatted values see. So this is just the false, but here it shows formatted 1. The yes no column shows allow. So status reason is 1, but is the formatted one is active. And the same for the primary contact. And we can see the formatted name. And another thing is setting the JSON value to the activity body. And that is useful when you want to set the dynamic number of users. You want to loop through some certain array and send to the number of users. And in that way, you can use this kind of, you can click on this and change it to the JSON view, and you can set the JSON instead of putting in the text box for each and add one. And if you want to send it from the unresolved email, you can use the address use parameter instead of binding to the records. So this is the one really important one that's one of the most traffic coming to my blog post. Which is how to set the lookup field. Especially in the CDS old connector, we can just set it just like that. It's really simple, easy. But in the CDS current environment connector, you need to set it, entity set name, open brackets, and GUID and the close brackets. And sometimes we should put the close bracket and we save and run the flow. It throws an error. When we check it, the end bracket is missing. So in order to avoid that, whenever you have finished writing the end bracket, cascade your step and expand it again and make sure the end bracket stays there. And otherwise, you will have to go and fix it again after testing your flow. And this entity set name is not a proper plural name. It is a little bit of Microsoft try to add up ES and S and IES depending on how they feel like. So it may not work what you think it is in the unusual plural names. So you can search, if you're a developer, you can search in the API to get the entity set name. If you're not developer, you can use I'm not sure most of us are familiar with the level up tool. You can use the entity metadata and you can set and search the entity name. Or you can even use the metadata browser and do another extension to set the one. So same thing, the clearing, the CDS is just setting the null, and CDS current environment connector, you need to relate. That's really ridiculous. So let's imagine you are clearing 5 fields, and then you just create unrelated records for 5 times. And this part is the URL of the current records and the relationship, and this is the UID of the record that you are going to clear in the unrelated. And here in the URL, we can use the auditor ID of the previous step for the get record or list records. You can use that instead of URL. But the auditor ID URL from the trigger, you cannot use that. Even though the attribute parameter is there, it always comes as empty. So you need to use get the records first to get the first auditor ID of the record that you are going to clear the lookup. So the same thing. So it is where you have to get the relate records. You can use the relate records with this audit. And if you don't want to get the auditor ID from the one trigger, you can build your own base URL. You can get the base URL from any of the list records or get record action by splitting in the string. So you have more details in this blog post. So another thing is set nullable value. So let's say you imagine you have this step above, you retrieve all these records, and you try to create another record, and one of the column may or may not be null. In that case, the old CDS connector would handle properly, but in the CDS connector, current environment connector, it will throw an error if the value is null because you are using this entity set name in front. So in order to avoid that, what you have to do is you have to check if it is empty. You set the double quotes, not double quotes, 2 single quotes. Otherwise, you can concatenate the entity set name, the UID, and the end of the closing brackets. So you can find out more details in the blog post here. So if you feel that it's really unnecessary, really hard for Microsoft to set up the clear up the null value, if you agree with me, just go and vote the Spark Automate idea. I sent the link in the chat window. So yeah, that's all about the getting and setting up the records in general. The other tips and tricks, we have this the CDS current environment cheat sheet by Danny, and you can go and find it in this URL below. And sometimes we try to debug the flows, and we want to skip the steps, some of the steps, and we only want to trigger the first part, and then we can just add the term, and the rest of the flows will not trigger. Then you can just debug this one. Or you can use the configure run after to skip certain steps, or you put into this block side. You can use the condition control, and if is 1 equal to 1, and you put the rest of the condition here, this will never run. And then once you have debug, you can just put it outside back to the here. And one other thing is you can also copy the clipboard, delete it, and then come back and replace it from the my clipboard. But don't forget and refresh the page because you will lose your clipboards. And the latest thing that I learned is we can use then on the static result, and you just put in succeed and OK, it will just run through the step without actually triggering. So there are other tips that I have documented, which is about how to include the record URL in the email, because in the classic workflow we have these features, but we cannot have it in the natively in Power Automate. So we can just build the environment host URL and build the app ID by querying the model-driven app by ourselves. And when you create the email attachment, the attachment column is mandatory. So we have to use the 2 single quotes to put it as an empty, so that the system will automatically handle that empty attachment. And some of the times it shows, when we list the records, we want to see the output, right? It just shows the status 200. At some point, it shows the show raw outputs option for me to see the output. It was easy, but then Microsoft might roll it back, that feature. I can't see it anymore. So in that case, I usually put a compose action to rerun it and see what's in the output of the compose. Okay, so this is the last slide about this connection reference. Microsoft has introduced this connection reference so that it won't break the flows when you import it into the other environment. So previously the flows were pointing to the connections, and when you bring it across, connections broken. Now that connections are using the connection reference. So all you have to do is import it from the modern solution import experience from make.powerapps.com. And you will just import it, and it will just ask you to reconnect all these connections for the connection reference. And whenever, even though it's a new preview feature, all the functionalities, all the new flows created are created with the connection reference. You can avoid it, so there's no choice but to introduce the preview features in the production. And for the existing flows, if you want to use the connection reference, you export them as an unmanaged solution and import them into the same solution. At the point of this time, there's a preview feature, so there's a limitation of the maximum of 16 times that you can use for one single connection reference within your flow. So if you have a really, really long flow and using the different multiple CDS connections, so you may have to use multiple connection reference. Yeah, that's all for today. So hopefully everyone's learned something. And if you have any question, just yell out.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, I thought I knew everything about the flow and the new connector, but I definitely picked up a few things there. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. Yeah, I don't have any more questions. Does anyone else have any questions? No, I think they've all asked their questions throughout the presentation. So it was yeah, it was good. That's a good presentation, Lynn. Appreciate your time. We're just hitting on 1 o'clock now, so we better quickly wrap it up. Just before we all go, with next year's national/local user group, it looks like it's going to be amalgamated into one big national one. However, it's going to cause potentially some issues with the time difference. So especially in summer for Western Australia, we're going to have some issues where if we have a lunchtime session being run over east, then there's going to be an issue here running around 2 p.m, which might not suit a lot of people. So I just want to ask a question to the community, and I'll send out a survey anyway, but would we be wanting to still run a local session here in WA, even though there'll be one running nationally? Would people still want to have a committee here driving that, or would people be okay to jump on at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, for example? Or even later in the evening to do these sessions from home. What do you guys think? Just type in the chat window, or just jump on the microphone if you want to have a comment. Anyone have any thoughts on that? And if not, I'll send out a survey anyway to the community, and we'll get some feedback. Cool. So yeah, this is the last session for the year. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ian, for presenting today. That was a good session, you guys. I appreciate that. And I'll reach out over email and via the platform to see if we want to hold another session for December. But normally we make November the last session for the year. But if there's anything anyone's eager to learn about and we can find a presenter for, I'm happy to do one more session. It's really just up to us to drive that. There's no real hard and fast rule of what we can and can't do. Yeah, cool. So that pretty much wraps it up for today. Peter, I think you will send me the link to the session and we'll just share that out.
Yeah, I will do. And just before we go, I just wanted to say a big thank you on behalf of Microsoft to you, Ben, and to the rest of the local committee for organising the events this year. I know it's quite a lot of time and we're all very busy, but we've had some great speakers this year, and it's really good for the community. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think it's been a pretty good year. The presentations have been really high quality this year, which has been really good. I've learned quite a bit through the user group sessions, so it's good to have various experts jump on and share, and it's been good doing it virtually as well. I think it's I know COVID hasn't been the greatest thing, obviously, but I think the virtual thing worked quite well for us here in Perth, because we're quite isolated from most people anyway. Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, so we thank you for your support, community members and presenters like yourself, Lynn and Ian, and everyone else who's presented in the past. It's been good. So if there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap it up, and we'll either see you again maybe in December, or if not, definitely next year in the new year. And if that's the case, everyone have a great break, a well-deserved break. It's been a tough year, and we'll potentially see you next year.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great Christmas.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
We'll catch you later.
Thank you very much.
Sure.